75% of Americans believe in UFOs. 30% of Americans believe UFOs are vehicles from other worlds. And 3% of Americans believe they have been abducted by aliens. That's over 8 million people. They're out there, aren't they?
Welcome to the UFO Files Show with your host, Jerry Pippin.
Hello, everyone. This is Jerry Pippin, and here it is November 4th at 7 o'clock Eastern, and I'm live by the phone. We're going to try to do some updates every Monday on our UFO show. I'd like to thank Inception Radio, by the way, for continuing to give us a time slot and the programs by rerunning them. Over the past year, as you know, I've been suffering from several illnesses, and including colon cancer, and I had a little problem with my bladder, and the good news is that that's cancer-free, and I have had a treatment on the prostate, and basically I think in another week and a half I'll be back to normal on that. I am walking around, and I am Inception Radio, and especially I'd like to thank everybody at Inception Radio for all their support and the good wishes. And I thought I'd spend a little time tonight talking about why I do UFO shows. A lot of people have asked me that over the years. As you know, I started doing syndication shows from Las Vegas and doing basically celebrity interviews and entertainment shows. And from that, I kind of got interested in Area 51, and since it's right there. And we did a few UFO shows, got good reception, good ratings, and so we've been doing them ever since. And actually, I'd done UFO shows off and on with my talk shows all the way back to the 1960s. And a lot of people in the present day that weren't around in the late 50s and 60s don't realize how active UFO reports were back in those days and how interested the American public was. The campaign to discredit everybody in the UFO business really didn't start till a little later and reached its apex, I think, about the 1990s. And they're still going strong, trying to...
This is special Sunday programming from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network, based upon a story from the New York Times, the growing aroma and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. This is Helen Cooper, Raph Blumenfeld, and Leslie Keene on the 16th of December, 2017. We will title our program The Pentagon's UFO Program on the 17th of December, 2017. We're indebted to an interview by Dr. Rita Louise, a sidekick of the late and famous Jerry Pippin, our former broadcast partner. They did their interview. It's on YouTube. We have linked to it in 2012. Jerry talks about Area 51, UFOs, and he goes into single payer, and from single payer to Obamacare, fake news, what people believe. They're skeptical about it, no doubt about that. And on to the death even of Osama bin Laden. There's a number of things. The interview is, of course, edited. There are two parts, and we've linked to that. Rita Louise, Dr. Louise, is a founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics, and host of Just Energy Radio. She is a naturopathic physician and a 20-year veteran of the human potential field. She's author of the E.T. Chronicles. This particular program is a very interesting program. We'll scan over and link the link. The $600 billion annual defense budget, $22 million spent on advanced aerospace threat identification program was almost impossible to find. And that's was how the Pentagon wanted it. For years, the program investigated reports of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, according to Defense Department officials interviewed with the program's participant and records obtained by the New York Times. It was run by a military intelligence officer, Luis L. Zuno, on the 5th floor of the Pentagon C Ring, deep within the maze of the building. The Department of Defense has never before acknowledged the existence of the program. It said which it said shut down in 2012. But backers say that while the Pentagon ended funding for the effort at the time, the program remains extensive. For the past 5 years, they said officials with the program had continued to investigate episodes brought to them by service members, which also carry out the other Defense Department duties. The Shadow program, part of it remains classified beginning in 2007. Initially, it was largely funded at the request of Harry Reid. Harry Reid was at one time the leader of the Senate and a Democrat from the state of Nevada, and a man that Jerry Pippin knew well when he lived in Las Vegas. Most of the money went into aerospace research run by a billionaire entrepreneur and longtime friend of Harry Reid, Robert Bigelow, who is currently working with NASA to produce expandable crafts for humans to use in space. In a 60-minute interview in May, Mr. Bigelow said he was absolutely convinced that aliens exist and UFOs have visited the Earth. You see a picture of Mr. Reid and Mr. Bigelow working with Bigelow, Las Vegas-based company. The program produces documents that describe sightings of aircraft that seem to move at very high velocity with no visible sign of propulsion or hover with no apparent means of lift. Officials with the program have also studied videos of encounters between unknown objects in American military aircraft, which includes one released in August, in which an object about the size of a commercial aeroplane chased two Navy F-18 fighter jets from the carrier NIPS off of the coast of San Diego in 2004. Reid, who retired from Congress this year, said he's proud of the program. "I'm not embarrassed, ashamed, or sorry I got this thing going," Reid said in a recent interview in Nevada. "I think it's one of the good things I did in my congressional service, and I have done some things that no one has done before, no doubt about that." Two former senators, that is Ted Stevens, his long-serving senator from Alaska, and the late Daniel Norway of Hawaii, also supported the program. Stevens died in 2010. Senator Norway died in 2012. While not addressing the merits of the program, Sarah Siga, an aerospace physicist at MIT, cautioned that not knowing the origins of an object does not mean it is from another galaxy. When people claim to observe a truly unusual phenomenon, it's sometimes worth investigating seriously, she said. But she added, what people sometimes don't get about science is that we often have phenomena that remain unexplained. Jerry Pippin says basically the same thing in his interview with Dr. Louise. James Oberg, a former NASA space shuttle engineer and author of 10 books on space flight, who often debunks UFO sightings, was also doubtful. There are plenty of events and human perceptions, traits that can be accounted for in these stories. Proselytic events. Anyway, Oberg said lots of people are active in the air and don't want others to know about it. No doubt about this. They're happy to lurk unrecognized in the noise, or even to stir it up as a camouflage. Oberg has said he welcomed the research. There could well be a pearl there. In response to questions from the Times, the Pentagon officials of this month acknowledged the existence of the program. Officials insisted that the effort had ended after 5 years in, that's the Defense Intelligence Agency, 2012. It was determined there were other higher priorities that merited funding. It was in the best interest of the DoD, Department of Defense, to make a change. That's the spokesman there, Crossan, said in reference to the Department of Defense. Mr. Elzono said that the only thing that ended was the efforts government funding, which died in 2012. From then on, Elzono said in an interview he worked with officials from the Navy and CIA, continued to work out of his Pentagon office until this past October, when he resigned to protest what he characterized as excessive secret and internal opposition. Why aren't we spending more time and effort on this issue? Mr. Zuno said. He wrote in his resignation letter to Mad Dog Jim Mattis. Mr. Elzuno said that the effort continues and that he has a successor who he didn't name. UFOs have been repeatedly investigated over the decades. Jerry Pippin talks about this, including the American military in 1947 began a series of studies that investigated more than 12,000 claims UFO sightings before it was officially ended in 1969. The project included on the code name Blue Book, started in 1952 when I was a baby. Concluded that, whatever, 1 year old. Anyway, the most sightings involved stars and clouds, conventional aircraft with spy planes, although 107 remain unexplained. Robert Siemens Jr., the Secretary of the Air Force at the time, said in a memorandum announcing the end of Project Blue Book that it no longer could be justified on the grounds of national security or in the interests of science. Harry Reid, interested in UFOs, came from Bigelow in 2007. Reid said in the interview Mr. Bigelow told him that an official with the Defense Intelligence Agency had approached him wanting to visit Bigelow's ranch in Utah, where he conducted research. Reid said he met with agency officials shortly after with Bigelow and learned they wanted to start a research program on UFOs. So that was when Senator Norway and got together. I talked to John Glenn a number of years before, the late great John Glenn, referring to the astronaut and former senator from Ohio, who died in 2016. Mr. Glenn, Mr. Reid said it told him he thought the federal government should be looking seriously into UFOs and should be talking to members of the military, particularly pilots who have these sightings. Sightings were often not reported up the military chain of command, Mr. Reid said. Stevens and in Norway, Mr. Reid says, one of the easiest meetings I've ever had. Ted Stevens said he had been wanting to do this since he was in the Air Force. He was a pilot in the Air Force during World War II, flying transport missions over China. During the meeting, Senator Reid said Stevens recounted being tailed by a strange aircraft with no knowledge of origin when he said he had followed his plane for miles. None of the three senators wanted a public debate on the floor. This was so-called black money, Reid said. Stevens knows about it, and Norway knows about it. But that was it, and how we wanted it, Reid said, referring to the Pentagon's classified budget. There's a picture of Mr. Bigelow there. Contacts obtained, by the Times show congressional appropriations of just $22 million beginning in 2008 through 2011. The money was used for management of program research and assessment of threats posed by the objects. Funding went to Bigelow's company, Bigelow Aerospace. You'll will go to their website. There's a link there. Under the direction, the company modified building in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials at Elzuno and the program's contractors said that had been received from unidentified aerial phenomena. Researchers also studied people who said they had experienced these phenomena. Jerry Pippin talks about that some in the interview. We're sort of in the position of what happened if you gave Leonardo da Vinci a garage door opener. This is from one of the engineers there, Harold N. Pulloff, who had been conducting research on extrasensory perception for the CIA. So there's a lot of things involved here. The program collected audio and video recordings of UFOs, including footage from the Navy's F-A-18 Super Hornets landing on a carrier. In 2009, Senator Reid decided that the program had made such extraordinary discoveries that he argued for heightened security to protect it. Much of the program had been made with the identification of several highly sensitive, unconventional aerospace-related findings, Reid said in a letter to William Lynn III, a Deputy Defense Secretary. In the resignation letter of Mr. Elzuno said there was a need for more serious attention to the many accounts from the Navy and other services of unusual aerial systems interfering with military weapon platforms and displaying beyond next-generation capabilities. He expressed his frustration with the limitations placed on the program, telling Mad Dog Mathis there remains a vital need to assure the to ascertain the capabilities and intent of these phenomena for the benefit of the armed forces and the nation. So now Elzuno is with Pithoff and another former defense work official, Christopher K. Mellon, who was a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intelligence. So this is kind of interesting interview. Zuno said he and his government colleagues have determined that the phenomena they have studied did not seem to originate from any country. So that is a footnote there. And for his part, Senator Reid said he did not know where the objects had come from. If anybody says they have an answer now, they are fooling themselves, he said. We do not know. But he said we have to start somewhere. And no doubt the start is they have formed an independent organization here. I don't know, it's a private. Invest in the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. Probably more art than science. The world's greatest opportunity to break free of bureaucracy and unlock revolutionary invention, aerospace, engineering, fraction technology, friction technology, beam energy proportion, advanced electrograding proportion. Not sure. Brain-free human interface, brain-computer interface, engineering the space-time metric, consciousness, and all kinds of things here. Full-featured films, I guess they're doing entertainment. Revolution is to a mind of a word. Wait a minute, is a 2 mile of a word. I'm sorry, Steve Justice, Director of Advanced Programs at Marquis Martin, Shrek Works, Head of Aerospace Technology at the Stars Academy. So they've got it all going on here. Stars Academy Arts and Science live broadcast. We'll listen to just a minute of this. We won't have time for the whole thing.
Early this year, I set out to do something pretty challenging. I wanted to shift perception on an extraordinary topic that had already over 70 years of research, opinion, and frankly, quite effective disinformation. I had the rare opportunity to present my ideas to an executive with the Department of Defense who worked in special access programs in an area called Watertown, also known as Area 51. That meeting led to multiple clandestine encounters across the United States, from desert airports to vacant buildings deep within Washington, D.C. From these exchanges, I learned three things. One, there are certain things that should never have been secret. Two, there are secrets that were justifiable at the time but should now be disclosed. And three, there are things that are so unimaginable that certain interests believe that they should never, ever be made public. After this, you might even agree.
That was 2000.
Hello, I'm Tom DeLong, and thanks for joining us live today. This quote above me actually happened to me this past year. When I was young, I dreamt about playing a rock show in front of all of my neighbors. As a seventh grader, that seemed unattainable. I never expected to be so lucky as to have a band like Blink-182 in my life. It was something that was much more further out than a dream. It was something not even possible in any scenario that I can think of. When I signed my first major record deal, I took my first check, bought a desktop computer, so I could research the possibility of intelligent life in the universe. I'd stay up all night cataloging, archiving, and highlighting small pieces of data, thinking I could find a unified theory of sorts, something to make sense out of the many elusive and mysterious events that seem to have interacted with mankind for thousands of years, sometimes for good and sometimes not so much. My passion for the subject helped me envision a more interesting existence for us all, something more infinite and more exciting than the usual. I was a typical middle-class kid from suburbia, except I loved mystery. It was like I was on my own imaginary ride searching endlessly for an answer to all that is, as if there was such a thing. Now in adulthood, I've started to use my limited notoriety as a tool, a door opener to meet important people. I also did this while combining all of my entrepreneurial experience over the past 15 years into one company that could keep up with my racing mind. The result was a creative machine to help me discover, comprehend, and communicate large themes about the human race. I called it To the Stars. I created a company that can produce original science fiction stories that inspire, entertain, and galvanize thinking. You would be surprised to know how difficult it is for the major film studios to create progressive content that is relevant, modern, or just plain cool. I've met with all of them, and their hands are tied in many ways. I believe we're filling a major void in the content creation space. I sometimes call To the Stars a science fiction Disney, but for adults.
That is Mr. Tom DeLong of this company that they have founded, and I have lost my I'll get it back here in a minute. Place here. Anyway, you'll see the link there, how it works. The Academy is composed of a science, aerospace, and entertainment divisions. They have a science division is designed to do theoretical and experimental in experimental laboratory to challenge conventional thinking with discovery of new world of physics and the conscious related possibility. And we talked about the others. Aerospace division is dedicated to find revolutionary breakthroughs in propulsion, energy, and communications, and various other things. And they're also in the entertainment business. I suppose they're producing films, period there. So they've got a lot of things going. The link is up there. We'll go now to the interview that Dr. Rita Louise did in 2017 with the late, great Jerry Pippin, where he covers extraterrestrials. He had been interested in it back in the 50s, he said, and in the 60s he started to do radio programs on it, and it continued on into the 2000s. He passed in 2015. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on WBRN Radio and the Bostonred Network.
Dallas one time at a conference in which I got the whole audience to start chanting my my website. Remember that time? That was a great Saturday.
That's why whenever I say your name, if I talk about you on air during a different show, I'll say, well, Jerry Pippin of jerrypippin.com. I mean, because it's just like one sentence. You kind of can't get away from it in my mind. I don't know.
We first went on the Internet as kind of a backup to our regular radio shows, like everybody else did back in the late 90s. And ultimately, the technology came around where, you can broadcast and almost anybody can get you now, even on an iPhone or on other phones and whatever. So we're quite happy being on the Internet now and have been for some time. We're pretty proud of our record of on-demand broadcasting, and we started that a long time before a lot of people did. And I notice you have over 5 years of archives, including some of my shows.
Can you believe that, Jerry? Yeah, all of here. Wait a minute, I'm going to click on your link, and I'm going to try to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, this will be 8. So yeah.
Well, you're almost up with me.
How long
I
have
noticed
you
something
had
happened
your
this
show?
morning on Facebook. You may not have noticed it. I noticed you were promoting the show, but they had a hack job going on. I don't know if you knew it or not.
On
Anonymous,
my stuff?
the hacking group, crashed Facebook, and it didn't affect my Facebook, but it did some people. Over thousands were without service for a while.
Well, I guess that happened to a friend of mine, and he got some little funky note saying, that they fixed his page. But he's uploaded hundreds of pictures of archaeological stuff from South America, Inca stuff, elongated heads, and if they eliminated his archive, that would be a shame to get hundreds of pictures. So, anyway.
Well, I think Facebook's going to restore it all. I'm not sure. I think they have a backup.
Well, it'll be interesting now that they've gone public, what kind of impact that is going to have on the service they provide and who has access to the information. I mean, one of the things that, you're a conspiracy guy. You'll understand where I'm coming from with this. One of the things about Facebook that kind of scares me is that they have access to everything that you post and are happy and willing to share it with anybody. It's really not private between you and your friends.
Well, you go on Facebook, they're going to be doing that to you. So I guess, you do it at your own risk. But you're right,
you and I know
privacy
that.
left. And some people put things on Facebook I'd never dream of putting on Facebook. And, of course, I've had hackers over the years put some pretty naughty things that I say on Facebook, and, of course, I didn't say them.
I don't know.
Does that happen to you?
Thank God, no. But I get you saying naughty things.
And I get, all kinds of weird things. So you I guess maybe we even don't need to worry about whether or not the postings are really ours that show up. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us to go back and look at those postings and make sure they are. And if they're not, delete them and, post a denial. And, of course, we can see the unintended consequences of that pretty easily. You could put up anything you wanted to, then come back and say, well, I didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's a new world. That's all I can say.
Very new. So I hear that you are actually doing live shows now on Inception Radio?
I'm doing live on Monday nights, mostly. I actually have been doing live for 4 or 5 months now, simply because I'm rebuilding my studio. And I don't know if you've ever done any outside contracting or not, but people come in and they said they'd be through last month, and they're still not through. And So basically, we'll continue with Inception Radio, and they have been very nice to me. And we use that on Monday nights between 6 and 8 Central Time, maybe 7 to 9 Eastern. It's basically UFO shows, period. Mm-hmm. And this coming Monday night, we have kind of an interesting show. In fact, it's a very interesting show, and if people have not heard any of the things that we've done from Roswell, and you and I had a lot of fun in Roswell together.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that maybe before it's over. But this Monday night, we're doing a 4-hour show, and 2 hours and 22 minutes of it is a radio drama. And it's all about magic and whether or not that really existed. And it was started, with the Roswell crash to keep everything secret in 1947. And we have a major playwright who wrote the play, and it was performed in front of a live audience in Roswell. And we recorded it and then added sound effects and original music by a guy named Janus, who's over in England and has done several CDs about UFOs. His latest is about Rendlesham, but before that he did a CD on Roswell, and we used some of that music, plus he created some original music for us. So what we're going to do on Monday night is pretty interesting, I think. We're going to open it up with kind of a late breaking story about what's happening in Roswell now, live, and take a few phone calls, maybe have a guest. And then we're going to play this recording of this drama, an old-fashioned radio drama, in which Marty Miller, the guy that wrote the play, has done exceptional work on just about everything that happened at Roswell is covered in this play. So if you wonder what happened, and I'm talking about from the moment it happened at 10 minutes to midnight on the 4th of July, and it opens up with some people at a convent there that know that they just have a feeling that there's something supernatural about to happen. And then it goes on from that point to the retrieval of the crash material. The complete story is laid out about trying to keep it quiet, threatening witnesses. What happened actually as far as people from Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon flying in, which they did. And also covers everything, all about the whole story. And then when it's over, we're going to discuss Roswell with the audience, live phone-in, and also we'll have another guest with a witness that nobody's heard about that we'll reveal on Monday night. And so it'll be a good show. It runs, as I say, from 7 to 11 Eastern, and then they repeat it as well a couple of times during the week. And we will have, we'll be unveiling our new Roswell section on our website. Are you ready? At jerrypippin.com. And
is that jerrypippin.com?
Yeah, and that'll be coming up this month. As you know, we're coming up on the 65th anniversary of Roswell, and from the date of the crash. And interestingly enough, they're not having it over the 4th of July. They're having it the weekend before. And I'm not quite sure why that's planned that way, but as you know, there's a lot of friction in Roswell, lots of different elements. A lot of different people want to do different things. And so they're doing the best that you can, and I have noticed that the same thing's been happening with other places. Maybe it's dirty tricks by the Defense Department or somebody, but they are able to get witnesses and people with good faith, researchers, etc., suddenly to turn on each other. Have you noticed that? That happened in Roswell even.
No, I don't. You know, you're the UFO guy. I'm the ancient mystery psychic chick. So share with the listeners, because I have not heard that, and that's interesting.
Well, they basically get the witnesses to go after each other. They start telling little tales. Even this last weekend, up at Area 51 at the conference they have up there, they had a lot of people going after each other. It's over, usually not over anything about UFOs. It's about personal things, about whose girlfriends, who's doing what to whom, and things like that. And, it just keeps building and building. And over in England, the Rendlesham Forest incident, which we can discuss a little bit if you'd like, and they have witnesses that are just going after each other like cats and dogs. And what happens is, I think somebody orchestrates that. And I think that somebody is, either the CIA or the Pentagon or Black Operations. And I don't want to sound too much of a conspiracy guy, but I'm convinced it's happening that way.
So you think that there are individuals kind of infiltrating these groups, just stirring the pot?
Yes. And I think they've got it down to a science. And I think that if you watch almost any of these, and it's not with just UFOs, it's with almost any of these things where perhaps the hand of the government or somebody has been involved in creating some sort of false flag or black operation detail. The best way to cover it up is to keep the witnesses who actually saw things to be, get involved in these emotional battles, and it muddies the waters. And they've got this down to a science. I don't think they even have to use any mind control or exotic weapons. All they have to do is just send somebody in there that's politics is that way too. And they do that in politics quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's called dirty tricks. And basically, if you can get into somebody's political camp and stir a little discontent, then it cripples the campaign. And that's used quite often, and it's been a matter of record over the years. With many campaigns, goes back to Dick Nixon and maybe before that. And so I think what I'm trying to say here is that most things that we perceive as the true story, there's always something going on behind the scenes. And they've got this down to a pretty good science now, and there's certain people that are really specialize in it. And so specialize in being the dirty trickster.
But why in the UFO community do they feel like they're getting too close or asking too much? It doesn't seem like they have that much influence and power.
Well, you're talking about the UFO researchers themselves not having enough power. Well, you're right about that. But the best way to do that is if you're getting close to a story and you're getting close to the truth, is to keep muddying the waters. I mean, let's take a look at Roswell alone. There have been so many far-out theories about Roswell. Now, let's give everybody a break here, and what I think really happened is a pretty far-out theory itself. And that is that in 1947, at a few minutes before midnight during a thunderstorm, a UFO crashed, and there were occupants in it. We discovered the occupants. We took them to the Army Air Force Base there in Roswell, and then flew them on out to other places where they perhaps they still exist. At least the records of the bodies recovered does, and some people say there was one or maybe two live occupants, and we can get into some of that here in a minute. But the point is that that's a pretty far out story right there. But that, in my opinion, after 600 witnesses interviewed by Don Schmidt and a few others, is just, and Stanton Friedman's done quite a lot of work on it as well, and quite a few other researchers. Dennis Balthazar's done some work on it. The point is that there's 600 witnesses that are saying they saw something, that something happened, and it was always first-hand stories. So with all of those witnesses out there, where there's smoke, I believe there's fire. And I believe if I were an attorney, I could go into a courtroom and prove by circumstantial evidence that something like that happened in Roswell. Okay, now we fast forward to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. Suddenly this is, it went away, that story went away, even though it was in the newspapers. It was all over the place in the 50s. UFO sightings were everywhere over the Capitol. It was even several UFO stories in the Washington Post with pictures of UFOs over the Capitol building itself in D.C. I remember I was in junior high school at the time, and our local paper here in the little town of Muskogee where I live in Oklahoma, they had a picture of a UFO over the White House in 1952. I still remember that to this day. That was probably the main reason I got involved in this type of show. I didn't start, I was a little young to be doing radio at that time, but I did start fairly young. I started in high school, but not doing talk shows, of course, not till later. But we decided we'd do talk shows because we're very interested in the subject. And in addition, science fiction series such as The X-Files and all, you name it, they were all very popular. So I thought, in my reasoning, why not do some real-life X-Files? And so we started doing some conspiracy shows on our talk shows. But back to Roswell and what happened in the 50th anniversary, the Air Force came out with a telephone book-sized report saying that it was dummies. And they named the crash dummy that they used, and it was in the balloons, and they were floating them up and testing them, and et cetera, according to this report. The only problem with that report was that those particular type dummies were not available for 5 years after Roswell. They weren't available till 52. And so then later on we come along here, and Nick Redfern, who I think you know,
he has a cot here in our studio.
Yeah, he came out with a book that said it was Japanese prisoners of war, and we were using them. And he quoted some sources for that. And then last year we had Annie Jacobson's book, in which she wrote about Area 51, and the thing that got all the attention was one chapter in which she said that this was Joseph Mengele of Nazi fame, the Dr. Death, who had experimented with building mutants, teenagers. And he had gone to Russia when the war was over, which is not true. He went down to South America. But he'd gone to Russia, and they had put these mutant teenagers in a craft that the Nazis had developed. Well, they did develop a flying disc in the 30s.
That Bell thing?
Yeah, and the only problem, it couldn't fly that far. And this, to fly from the Soviet Union to Roswell, New Mexico, meant that would have to go through all of our radar and defensive commands during the height of the Cold War in 1947 and somehow make a crash in Roswell. So you keep getting all these far-out stories, and they're all there for one reason, and that's to muddy the waters. Because the average person out here is not following this every day like I am. They hear a headline or an interview here or there, and that's basically all it is. It's just a headline, and you go into something else. And you and me and any other human being that uses their mind recall some of these things they heard in the past, and they start putting them together. So we're at a point, Rita, where if a UFO landed on the White House lawn today, every TV network, of course, would be there, and they would cover it. And President Obama might come out of the White House and shake hands with the ET. And within 2 or 3 hours from the time that happened, the opposition candidates and political powers would be on television saying it was a Hollywood liberal idea to bring Obama back so he could get elected, and that this was special effects, and on and on and on. So I think if you even brought an extraterrestrial to a press conference, there'd be people that would not believe it. On one hand, that's kind of healthy that we don't take everything with truth when we see it on television. On the other hand, cynicism has risen to a dangerous, very dangerous proportion at this time. Most people don't really accept almost anything. If you really talk to them and listen to them a little bit, they'll say, well, that's what they say. I guess that's true. Things like that.
Yeah, it's a joke.
How is that for a short answer?
I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting about, like someone like you, someone like me, is that we have a very unique perspective. There's doing our own research, which I love researching, and I know you love reading and kind of keeping up to date, but we become kind of a filter for other people's research. So there's what we look at and what we think about. And then we have people like Stanton Freeman coming in, or like I have Richard Dolan scheduled to come on to talk about his new work, and Nick Redfern, all kind of giving us these little pieces of other information so we can almost take it's like we're in a position where we can kind of take a step back and process a lot of different people's information into our little database of material.
Well, that's true. And this is, again, the reason, I guess, the human mind is superior to the computer, even though the computers are pretty much of a miracle. And that is that we can reason, and we do have the ability to assimilate data. And if we are objective, and of course that's the big problem, being objective. Most people, I don't guess anybody's 100% objective. We have our own background, our own ideas, the way we were reared, the way we want to believe. And so we try to make all of those new facts that we find fit into what we want to believe, which makes our job as talk show hosts to deal in these subjects a little difficult, I think, simply because people listen with a jaded ear, so to speak. In other words, they listen and say, oh, yeah, sure. They find it interesting, very entertaining. But are we making a lot of dents? I think we are. It's the reason I have continued to do this for so many years. But it's basically, I think the problem we have when we talk about not only UFOs but conspiracies in general is the fact that some of these things happen on a regular basis, like cops pulling a black man over and beating the hell out of him, and we just kind of get jaded about it and say, oh, that doesn't happen very often. That was just something unusual. And so then, after a while, the people who are doing these dastardly acts, whatever those dastardly acts are pretty well to do. They can do it with impunity. And they have used the thing that should be getting them and nailing them to the wall, they use that as a defense, and that is this mixed bag of information we get every day. And it's kind of like a buffet where you can reach over and grab an idea that fits your ideology and hold on to it. And then it's be damned with the facts later, simply because we believe with all our heart and soul it was this way. And this, of course, is very true in religion. Mm-hmm. But it's true in almost anything. Politics, you name it. Even probably in what you want to order for dinner.
But it seems
you're
like
dealing those sort of things, diet and things like that, and some people, regardless of knowing that a certain food is bad for them because of their certain condition, still insist on eating it.
Because it's tasty.
And I found that be first-hand experience since I've been having some health problems with my kidneys. I'm on a very strict diet to avoid dialysis, and the problem is that I basically, the foods that I like, I've been eating all the wrong things all my life, and so, and I'm sure you can expand upon that a lot better than me. But fortunately, as far as I want to talk about, I don't sound very good today, and I apologize for that. But it's not anything drastic for anybody to be worried about. I think that I'm just got a few problems here with my voice today, and that might even be as simple as being just we have had strange weather in my part of the country, Texas and Oklahoma. Been kind of cool, and the pollen has been blowing around, and that's probably what's affecting me. So people shouldn't read much more into it, but this dialysis thing and my kidneys, I've had the same problems for now 8 years, and nothing's happened to me. And so, for a long time I didn't pay much attention to it, even though my doctors kept getting alarmed. But it could be, I guess it could go any time. And if I didn't know better, I would say I've been under a biological attack from somebody, because I've had unbelievable situations. I've had an infection that nobody could identify. That first it swelled up my hand and my arm, and after several trips of antibiotics down the journey of taking antibiotics, and some of them making you deathly ill and some of them not, and many blood tests and many other tests, they really couldn't find out exactly what was wrong. There was some kind of staph infection involved. It was a dirty mix of something in my blood that I should not have had. And now it's attacked me on my left foot and my left arm. I mean, my left leg. And I'm once again getting ready for another long, I guess, journey for blood test and to find out what's there. And meanwhile, I had another thing happen to me, and I went to have some elective surgery in case my kidneys did really go, that I'd be ready for dialysis, and flunked my EKG. And so I took several other tests with several other people, and all the tests were mixed. And I seem to have some shortage of breath, and seem to have lost energy. And so but I haven't done the angiogram thing, which is pretty simple to a routine operation these days, simply because with all the modern medical science they have, evidently, there's not any dye, unless you know about something, Rita, that does not affect your kidneys when they shoot it in there to see if you have blockage in your veins. And as my surgeon said, the hospital's going to ask me what the hell I'm doing to you if I do this to you, and so I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place there. But we're treating it all with diet and medications and things, and most of the days I feel pretty good. And,
well, I mean, one of the things that I find about the medical community is that they'll look at your test, but they really won't dig any deeper. You know, unless, I mean, I don't know what you have to do. I've had so many clients that have things going on. They go through the test, and the doctor's like, well, you know, come back in 6 months, you know, because maybe you'll be worse, and we'll do something at that point in time. Meanwhile, they can't get out of bed. And I've told people, you know, you have this weird infection that you need to go to, like, a virologist for them to assess you, because it's not normal, it's not typical, and, you know, you need somebody that's actually, like, going to do some research on you and do some digging, you know, like a Dr. House. You know, you need somebody that's going to actually, you know, put you in their radar and focus on it, as opposed to waiting for you to have some other kind of symptom. So
I agree with you. And we've been doing the best we can, but it's pretty tough. The medical profession is pretty well confined to just routine things and going on about it. Don't you agree?
Well, and that's going to get even worse once Obamacare, you know, comes into play. I mean, you know, they're already scared. The medical community is already scared of what that's really going to do to health care. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah. I'm, I'd like to throw something out here for since I've had all of a sudden a lot of experience with the medical profession in the last 2 years, and before that I was fairly healthy and really very seldom ever saw a doctor, and that basically was that. I don't find the doctors themselves. A few of them maybe politically would be inclined to not like things like Medicare, but most of them would be out of business if it weren't for Medicare. If you add up their ratio of patients, how many people they see, and how they're getting their tests, and they get paid for all of this, you know, and the unintended consequences of that, of course, is that there'll end up being a lot of people getting treated for a lot of things they don't need. And I don't know how you handle all of this. I have my own pet theory about it, and I think that is the big mistake they made. And, of course, Obama couldn't get it through, and he didn't try to get it through, and he should have tried to get it through, was to have a single payer system in competition with the other medical groups. In other words, we're talking about you can make regulations that make people really strong and make them have to do certain things and resent it, or you can actually set up a situation where you have a nonprofit entity, such as a federal government or a third party or whatever they set up, and this nonprofit entity is treating people as well. So then the insurance companies and the medical profession itself would have to rise to the occasion. Right now they pretty much can do what they want to do, and they can charge what they want.
Well, it's a money-making enterprise. More tests, more money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't. We were having this conversation the other day about diabetes, is they've been working on diabetes since the 50s, or like muscular dystrophy, the Jerry Lewis telethon, collecting millions and billions probably of dollars, but there's no cure. I mean, I don't know if, trying to create a cure is something that we should just say is unrealistic, and the only way that it can be dealt with is for it to be treated. And if they could just say that this is a fact of life, it cannot be cured. We can't give you a one-time pill or do this little bit of surgery and you're cured for the rest of your life. But at least be honest about it. But it seems like they just want to treat it and put you onto some kind of prescription medication so that they can just charge you for the rest of your life for taking the same thing over and over again. But at least, if that's the case, be honest about it.
Well, I agree with you completely, and it's amazing. They may not be able to cure diabetes, and probably the reason they can is we're ingesting all the wrong kind of things into our body from the age of 1 year old or maybe under. Look, you just go to I went to the post office yesterday, and I was standing around like everybody else has to at the post office these days, waiting to get waited on. And everybody in that line, there's probably 12 people, and 8 of them were overweight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every place you look, people are, we're not taking care of ourselves.
I mean,
I think that's
seen
part
people...
of the problem. Just like talking about the possibility of my kidney failure, it's operating, I think, at 22%, I think, as always has been for the last 10 years. Maybe it's always been that way. How would I know? I didn't have it tested, But the point is that I was eating the wrong foods. I mean, it's pretty simple what the kidneys does. And the kidneys are kind of like, remember those old, well, you probably are too young to remember it, but back in the dairy farm business, when you had individual family dairy farms, they had a place where you pour the milk in, and they would screen out all the stuff before you take it to the dairy. Well, that's what the kidneys do. They screen out everything in the blood, and now if you have diabetes, then all of a sudden you have too much sugar there, and that little screen, and I'm making this simple and probably making you cringe because you are into the health business and probably could explain it much better than me, but it basically screens out all of these things out of the blood, your kidneys does, and here we're talking about diabetes gumming up the works. This would be the same thing if you were trying to screen something and all of a sudden your screen was all sticky. And that's what happens with diabetes. And then, of course, the other major problem with kidneys is blood pressure. And the blood pressure breaks those little things, the little screens, and they can't really screen properly. And so why does a half of America all of a sudden on blood pressure pills? I guess we do have a pretty frantic society, but it's, I think in most people, if you take the blood pressure over a given week, that have several readings, some of them a little high, some a little low.
Well, no, I agree that, the foods that we eat are awful. And the foods that we're trained to eat, and I feel like my generation are like the last ones that learned how to cook food. Like Betty Crocker cookbook, how to cook a chicken and vegetables without taking it out of the freezer, and microwaving it. And people nowadays are being brought up to live on fast food, live on frozen foods, consume sugar. I have seen so many adults buy their 8-year-olds, maybe younger, Starbucks Frappuccinos with coffee, with all that sugar and crap in it. And I'm just like, they should take your children away from you, because that's just, not just the sugar part, but you're also like giving them all this caffeine at 8 o'clock in the morning. It just is not right, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you, and I don't unfortunately see it changing.
No,
we probably need to get off that subject
it's
and get back
to make it.
Something
okay.
a little
All right.
more pleasant. I don't know. It's up to you. It's your show.
Anyway, let's go back to Roswell. You know, one of the things that you were talking about, and it doesn't have to be about Roswell, but just the whole UFO phenomena, is the concept of so many people witnessing an event. You know, and so we have people witnessing an event here, we have people witnessing an event in Rendlesham, we have people witnessing an event in Stephenville, we have people, you know, in this area witnessing an event, and we have all these events happening over time. In a court of law, you would think that just based on the preponderance of evidence, that it should be deemed as being true and convincing versus unreliable and fantasy.
Well, here's again this reason I said I think it's substantially I could prove something in court that something happened, because do you think there are millions of people that are great fiction writers? Maybe so. Do they all just come forward and make these things up? It just doesn't seem very logical to me that that would be what's happening. Now, I understand that there are people that are doing that naturally, but I would hope that would be the minority. And even if you could explain, and we have had many detectives and many people with police backgrounds, investigative backgrounds, investigate things in the UFO and paranormal industry. And even if you could do all of that, there's still a lot of it that doesn't add up. In other words, there's some direct evidence, and people do see things. We could talk about any kind of the phenomena you want to, but abductions is probably one of the best things to discuss. And I can tell you, and please don't misunderstand me, audience, I still do abduction shows, and I think there is something going on. But many of these people that I run across that have had extraterrestrial abductions, they are not, how shall I say this?
Well,
they're not completely balanced anymore. But then you go back to, wouldn't this event affect you? Wouldn't this event make you not rational sometimes? So I don't think you can just take somebody that comes and tells you a story and say, well, they're nuts. I think you need to explain and understand why they are the way they are. And I've come up to the conclusion that there is something going on. That there is something. Maybe not all of the people that come forward have had things happen to them. But many people have had night visitors in their dreams, and they have night sweats, and they can't move. And we were talking about my health problems earlier. Being the conspiracy guy, the first thing I was thinking about was who shot me with a needle, or who gave me something to give me these infections. And I live a pretty protective life. I don't get out a whole lot. I don't. I'm a workaholic. I work a long time on my shows and on my websites and in the industry itself. And there's a lot of things behind the scenes that a lot of people don't think about working on. As you know, Rita, you're one of the best of covering the advertising angles and the promotional angles, and all those things have to be done. So I'm not out here mixing around with people, so I don't think anybody could have dropped a vial of something in my food or come into my apartment and give me a needle in the middle of the night. And I don't think anything like that happened, but it could have. And so when we talk about abductions and the UFO experience itself, here again, some people have heard these stories. They've seen the horror movies. They've seen the things. So naturally, some of them are being affected. But I think there's a lot of evidence that something is going on. Now, how do you prove it? I don't know.
No, I agree.
What's your idea about abductions? What do you think?
I mean, I'm not an abduction person, but I'm going to give a parallel. Because I do a lot of work with entity attachments and helping people get dark and negative entities out of their life, out of their auric field, and get rid of them. And I have some people that come to me that truly, in my opinion, jump all over it.
They tried to talk to a few people about it, and their parents told them not to talk. In fact, that's the end of the story. Probably the best way to wrap it up is... guess what? The officer from the Army base, White Sands Missile Base, came by the family after they retrieved it and hauled it off on a flatbed truck, or I guess a lowboy. If they existed, lowboys back in those days, I guess they did. They came back and they said, guess what? They used the same story before Roswell. It was a weather balloon. And they retrieved it, and it would be best if they didn't tell anybody about it because it was involved in top secret warfare development. So nobody talked about it.
Could there have been a connection between? I'm even going to make it spread a wider net. The crash you're talking about, the one in Roswell, and the supposed base that's in Dulce, New Mexico? I mean, could they have been actually heading for that base and then crashed en route?
Well, they could have. New Mexico is truly a place of high strangeness. And we can talk about Dulce. It's an interesting development. I thought I'd really discovered something about Dulce a couple of weeks ago.
And actually, you know what? Hold that thought. Hold that thought, because I just looked at the clock and we need to take a quick commercial break. So I went to the commercial break. We went to the commercial break and you weren't saying jerrypippin.com while I was trying to do my little exit thing. I was surprised.
You're a doll.
Okay. So before we went to break, we had just touched on the topic of Dulce, New Mexico, and so we've only done, I think, one show, and that was with Edmund Gomez talking about the cattle mutilations. So maybe you could bring the listeners a little bit up to speed of what is believed is going on in that area, as well as what your revelations of the last couple of weeks have been.
Okay, well, first of all, most people probably are not familiar with Dulce. It's a town on an Indian reservation, and it's right next to Osceola Mesa, which is a really very scenic part of the country of northern New Mexico, which is very pretty and very mysterious, and lots of high strangeness has happened there. Native legends, stories of Bigfoot, cattle mutilations, as you mentioned, and many other things, just mirages of beings appearing and disappearing, and lots of reports of flying craft, flying disc, if you may, over the years have been reported there as well. Now, if you took Osceola Mesa and drew a line, you would find that it would probably be logical to assume, because there was back, they called it Project Gas Buggy, in which they literally, now this is a pretty far out reason for the Bureau of Landmines and Energy Department to release, but they did, and released it with a straight face. And that was that they were doing an underground nuclear explosion to free up natural gas to make it possible for natural gas to be mined in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico. And a lot of people say that was a nuclear explosion, all right. And there's evidence that it was, because there's still Geiger counter readings that show it. But they feel that they were digging an underground tunnel operation, an underground base operation from Los Alamos, the secret place where the nuclear weapon itself was developed, all the way down to Kirkland Air Force Base, Sandia Base, which is an Army base close to there, down around Albuquerque, and all the way up to northern New Mexico, to a place called Dulce. Now, there have been rumors, and there have been many people that have come out and said that they have seen extraterrestrials at that base. And there have been stories written. Anthony Sanchez has written a pretty interesting book called UFO Highway, in which he discussed and was on the air with us many times. And Rita, you know Anthony, I think you're going out to his conference, right?
I am. It's actually just in a couple of weeks, June 6th, 17th and 18th in Sacramento, California. It's like, Well, we've tried to have Anthony come on the show a couple of times, and I don't know what has been going on, but it just seems like it goes kaput. So I'm trying to get him back on the show probably in September, but we haven't worked out that detail.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and we were talking. Rita, today's June 1st, and it's a pretty important date, and a lot of people don't realize it. And I'll tell you why it is. There's a little thing happening over in the North Sea in Europe, and they had a group of divers get together. They've been talking about doing this for a while. And they left Stockholm in Sweden this morning, and they're going out to the North Sea, and they're going to go to a location in which there have been pictures and photographs of something lying on the bottom of the ocean. And the pictures that come back all seem to indicate that it's a UFO. And it's been laying there for some time. And for some reason, they haven't been able to get out there to take a look at it. Nobody really knows if that's a shipwreck or a UFO, some mysterious object that's discovered deep beneath the Baltic Sea. And the treasure hunters left this morning to go find it, and they're scratching their heads, but they can't wait to get there. We have their email addresses at jerrypippin.com, and we've contacted them, and we are going to see if we can't get the first information on exactly what's happening. One of the divers has 20 years of experience. He was down on the bottom, saw nothing like this, and I'm talking about a commercial diver himself, and I believe his name is Peter Lindbergh. In fact, he was on CNN, the leader of the team of the Deep Sea Salvage Group, and they were talking about this possible UFO being at the bottom of the sea. So when you talk about the media not necessarily reporting on UFOs, I think that's changing somewhat, don't you, Rita?
I think, I just saw that picture this morning, and, when people post stuff on Facebook, sometimes you have to, or anywhere, you have to kind of look at it and go, okay, so is this a real thing? Like someone had posted recently that they found a crystal pyramid in the Bahamas somewhere, and it's, but then there was an artist reproduction of what the pyramid would look like, which to me says, okay, it's not really much. And I couldn't tell from the picture if it was an actual image or, side sonar image or what that was, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because if the image is an actual picture of what they saw down there, someone made the comment, it looks like the Millennium Falcon, which was, what's his name, from Star Wars, his ship. But it does look like a ship, not a natural rock formation. How's that? Well,
I guess a lot of people, we see things on Facebook especially. You're right, that have been kidney dialysis. It was a little tough to think about it and getting it in that cave there at Bora Bora, but military suppliers by military corporations, and the whole thing stinks to high heaven. But I have not heard any outrage. I would not, I've not heard any outrage about what we did to Osama bin Laden, and of course not, because he's kind of like Jesse James. So what? He shot him when he was hanging a picture. He was a no good bum, and I don't know.
I mean, I had issues about that whole scenario. I mean, if his compound was filled with people and there was a big shooting match going on and he was just a casualty, that would have been one thing, and it would have been acceptable in my mind. But it didn't sound, he had one bodyguard and his wife. Woo-hoo! I'm sure they put up a really big fight, to not get caught. It's just a very sad scenario of how the whole thing played out. But where I want to go, though, with the whole 9/11, you're talking about the money with 9/11, but what also came in with that was the increased crackdown with security, TSA, Homeland Security, and invasion of privacy.
And look, not only did it cement power for those groups, but those powers in today's society are privatization, cover stories, simply because TSA is a private organization. They get lots of money from lots of people to operate these things. And I don't know if you know how the government pays these companies that do third-party things for them. They get a fee on top. And if there's income involved, they get 15% there, and then all they can steal. So, I mean, we hear all these arguments every day about the budgets, and we got to cut this, and we got to cut mom and dad and grandpa out, get them out of the nursing home. We can't afford to pay them anymore. And at the same time, we're spending much more money, 3, 4 times, 5 times as much, on these things like security agencies, the corporations that are hired to operate. If you examine the budgets of the terrorism apparatus and how the government pays for it, you'd see that well over 2/3 of the budget goes to third parties who then do the work. And we haven't even discussed some of the other things we've been doing in 9/11, and that's torturing people routinely. And you have people of well-respected credentials getting on television talking about, well, if we could save another 3,000 people, why not torture somebody? Well, that's really not apples and oranges. The question is, do we want to be doing what's right, or we want to do what is wrong? And do we want to do what is wrong to make things right? Well, 2 wrongs don't make a right in my book, and they never have. And when you let people get away with maybe doing a little waterboarding here, or maybe hooking this guy up to some electric wires a couple of times, what the heck, he's no good anyway. Pretty soon that's pretty routine. Pretty soon it doesn't bother them anymore. It's pretty much
they're
the
building
same.
a FEMA camp right down the street from us. Well, all right, not right down the street, but about 20 minutes from us. They're putting in a FEMA camp.
Yeah, you wonder what they're doing. FEMA ordered all of these shells. I don't know if you knew about that. They ordered an ungodly amount of ammunition, and they bought it. They got it paid for by the budget. Now, what are they using that for? Who are they going to be shooting?
We were talking to this one guy, I don't know, we met at a concert, and he said that because he likes to shoot guns just for a hobby kind of thing. And he says that buying ammunition has been difficult because the government has been buying it all up.
Well, it was a matter of record. FEMA admitted how much they bought. I don't have it in front of me right now. It was an unbelievable amount. They could line people up all day and fire and fire and fire and probably not use it all. So who's okaying that?
But what are in your opinion, what are the camps for? I mean, why are they building these things? Who are they going to put in them? Hopefully not me and you, although we could hang out because, we'd probably be in the same one. But
yeah. Well, there's a lot of unanswered questions that nobody's asking questions about, and that's one of the. I'm going to say something here that maybe people will wonder why I say it, but I'll try to explain it. And all these things we were just talking about, 9/11, JFK, Osama bin Laden, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, which everybody knows was started under false pretenses now. None of that was true. And nobody's paid a price for that. All of that, we can hold all these people responsible, and I think they are war criminals. But really, the real problem is the media.
Mm-hmm.
The media has not done its job. The media evidently, there's lots of good people in the media. I've been in the media all my life. I know a lot of people that don't agree with me that I respect highly about the 9/11 story about Osama bin Laden, but they never really asked the questions. They just took the government's handout of the press release at face value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way it works, or should have worked. America became a great institution and a great country and a great power in the world because people asked questions and they felt that we were doing the right thing, even if we made a mistake. Our intentions were right. Well, nobody believes that about us now. Go around the world. You and I on the internet, we have international listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And what they think and what Americans think are totally different. And the reason is because we're not getting the information. And we can go over why that's happening, but the major reason is one reason and one reason only, and it's because the pursuit of a plutocracy. A plutocracy is where the rich and famous run something. They do it for their interest. And we have the 99% movement now against the 1%. And I think they're actually on the right track, but many people are paying much attention to it. The point is that we have lost all of our moral compass because of the pursuit of the almighty dollar. And we have found out that it's much easier to make money by using the government and by using fair tactics. I mean, when I went to college, nobody wanted to go to work for the government. They didn't pay much. And the college didn't offer any degrees in it. Now every university in America offers degrees on how to work for the United States government, how to become a contractor, how to benefit from it. It's a big sugar daddy. And it's not the big sugar daddy for the welfare recipients, for the welfare moms and all of that. It's a big sugar daddy for big business. I mean, just recently, it became out that the oil companies, if you tax them just fairly like everyone else, then we probably wouldn't have any debt at all. Meanwhile, they're still charging $4 a gallon or pretty close to it. And where did that money come from? It's pretty obvious that when you go to fill up your tank in your car of gasoline today, $22 of that, it goes to speculation. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean people who have bidded on the price of the oil at the barrel. They bidded up the price of the commodity on the gasoline itself. And it's all, when we say bid it up, what I'm saying is they've added their own little profit margin in there. And you got 3 or 4 or 5 times it's bidded before it ever gets to the market. So all of a sudden, we're paying a lot of people a lot of money for doing nothing. I know when we used to talk about, when I was a young man, I used to think about what would be good careers. Advertising was a good career, and selling insurance was a good career. Now, let me tell you why I say that. Both of those jobs have something in common, and that is if you're an insurance agent and you sell somebody some insurance, you keep getting residuals over and over as they keep renewing and renewing. So you didn't do much work for that. And advertising, it's the same way. I get a good account, put it on jerrypippin.com or put it on the Rita Louise show. They renew. I didn't do much more business to get renewed and on, but I still get a commission. And that's exactly how we work in America now. Everybody's trying to figure out how they can make a lot of money for nothing. And so we got 5 media giants running everything. And out of the 5, at least 3 of them, in my opinion, of those corporations are up to no good, not only making extensive profits by laying everybody off, no longer paying anybody a decent wage. They call it a nice little fancy word, maximizing profits. And what it is mean cutting out the middleman, cutting out the little guy, don't pay anybody. And so you go to Wharton Business School, they used to teach ethics. They don't teach it anymore. Now they teach you that the main thing is to get that margin from what it costs to do business to what you're making to do business as wide as possible, and for you to keep it in the family, in the corporation, as much as possible. And so what we have is, I tell you a good example, and we're almost out of time here, but what we have here is a fact that if you just look at the Justice Department, people who work for the United States Department of Justice, talking about prosecuting, I'm talking about lawyers, they don't stay prosecutors long. Guess where they all go? They go to Washington, D.C., they work as a top-notch prosecutor for a while, and the next thing you know, they're working for a big bank, or they're working for Wall Street itself, or they're working for an insurance company or a pharmaceutical company. They're not prosecuting anymore. I don't care how great they were. They found, the corporations found out they hired the prosecutors to find out what they were doing so they can make sure they don't get caught. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. And
hey, Jerry,
until we get somebody
in
office that is really interested, and it may be impossible now.
They'll just take them out.
Everybody's a paid spokesman for some money interest. Anyway, end of my lecture. And to answer your question, I don't think it was Osama bin Laden, but if it was, why in the hell did they do all that? Why didn't they just tell us? Why didn't they have an open trial?
I don't know. I thought, assassination was against the Geneva Convention or against something somewhere. I thought that was, illegal.
And the sad problem in my part, the sad situation is that nobody cares. They let these people do whatever they want to do. They create these tragedies, they create these crises, then they do something about it, and they're heroes.
All right, Jerry, we need to go, so tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
JerryPippin.com.
All right.
JerryPippin.com.
As always,
I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too, Jerry, and I will talk to you later, okay?